I'd like to welcome everyone to tonight's meeting of the HR Committee. Michelle? Oh, do we have any public comments on the HR agenda? Okay.
Thank you, Mrs. Moore. I have two items tonight to discuss with you. First, it would be just an informational item regarding the district's employee assistance program. On the upcoming April 20th public board meeting, the board will see the contract for consideration of approval. We would be requesting to change our provider from Penn Behavioral Health to Health Advocate, effective July 1, 2023. Health Advocate has worked with the district in the past for a wellness program. We had very good reception from our staff, and with the Bucksmont Consortium made up of an administrative representative and a teacher representative, collectively with the county, have decided that moving in the direction of Health Advocate would be very beneficial. They are located right here in the Bluebell area. The services would remain the same. The pricing is a little bit better for the district. And so I simply wanted to bring that to your attention, that will appear on the April 20th board agenda for your consideration. Are there questions about that item? Okay. Also, I am asking that you review policy 311, which is reduction of staff. This particular policy basically is a first read. There will be a first reading on the April 20th board meeting and a second reading, and hopefully an adoption of the policy at the May 20th or 23. Excuse me, I'm all tongue twisted right now. Board meeting. This is a new policy. It is categorized as legal liability for the district. So it's a policy that will be identified as number 311 and simply governs what the district is responsible for, the board along with the superintendent, for maintaining appropriate staff at the administrative, professional, and classified employee levels, and what those responsibilities would look like, and what determination we would have to make, and recommendations the superintendent would have to make to the board should there be any reduction of staff. Of course, there are laws, thank you, that are governing what the requirement would be, and the Pennsylvania Department of Education requirements that would require us to take into consideration should there ever be a reduction in staff. Are there questions about the policy?
And be evidenced by the facilities meeting and the impending enrollment study, reduction of staff is not an area that the district will be investigating in the near future. But it is a policy PSBA recommends that we have and have in place, and there are very specific reasons when you can reduce staff, including programmatic changes or decrease enrollment. But you just can't, the board nor the superintendent's office can just decide to reduce staff. And that's never been the intent of this board, nor is it moving forward, but it's good to have it in place so that we have policy to fall back on should the need ever arise. But as I said, from what you're about to see, and as evidenced by the 513 first graders and 450 plus kindergartners, and we're nearly at 400 kindergartners for next year, the class sizes are rather robust moving forward.
Any other questions? That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Any questions or comments? Okay, this meeting is adjourned.
Sorry. At this point, are there any questions for the audience, for the FNC? So go ahead, Jeff, we'll turn it over to you.
Good evening, everyone. The item we have on tonight's agenda is the additional classroom needs for the Colonial Elementary School. And Dr. Christian and Mark Dejan and myself have been working with GKO architects on a couple of options to present to the board that could help us with this future enrollment bubble, as Dr. Christian just mentioned, 513 current first graders, the class that we have our sights set on, and the classes behind it until we get the enrollment study are, again, just growing. So with no further ado, this is Mr. Kevin Gottschall from Gottschall King Work Architects, and he's going to review some options for the board this evening.
And just so the board is aware, before Kevin gets started, GKO has worked with the school district previously on the high school project, as well as most recently in helping us with doing the work on
All our floor plans,
the floor plans and doors for our school safety plan, because they have such familiarity with our schools. And Kevin has specific knowledge with this building, which you're about to hear about. When I came to the district, he had explored several different opportunities for the board to consider. So, and he also happens to be the parent of 2 graduates at the school. But I just want the board to know he's well versed with our community and with the schools. And
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here again. So we've been working with the administration. We're going to review 4 design options tonight, and these are very preliminary, but 4 different approaches for how we can try to provide more capacity in this building. Is it possible to get the presentation up? Oh, is that something I do?
we're specifically looking at this building and the administrative offices, something that the board knew about, actually part of the notes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Districts, almost 6 years ago, but the board was already thinking about that, and now the larger first
Thank you,
grade
sir.
actually start to have plans in place. Because, we did a small renovation a couple years ago that created 5 classrooms, and that gets us to 930. We're talking about 950 to 1,000. That's a different approach, and we're well positioned to handle that growth at the middle school, obviously, and the high school because of the previous construction.
Okay. So I'm just going to start off with some numbers, and Joe had summarized these earlier, but right now the current enrollment at Colonial Elementary is 815 students. The building is at capacity, and it was, as mentioned, 4 or 5 years ago, I think there was some limited renovations done to try to create some more space, but it's been operating pretty much right at its capacity level. Looking forward, we're predicting 150 additional students. And as Dr. Christian said, right now the first grade class is 512 students, and the current kindergarten enrollment is 455, and I listed and growing, because obviously that's a number that keeps going up as parents continue to register. That totals up to 967 students, which is 150 students more than what's here right now. So that's kind of the target of what we're looking for. And I know I'm saying things that everyone in this room is aware of, but obviously the 4-5 building is the only 4-5 building in the district. So there should also be some attention to looking forward, because where are you going to be in 20 years if Conshohocken keeps growing higher and White Marsh keeps filling in their pocket developments? You don't want to cut yourself off to a future addition, because this is the only place that you can deal with 4th and 5th grade students in this current model. So the target that we're looking at is to find an additional 8 to 10 classrooms. Now, assuming 25 students per classroom, that might be 6 classrooms, but also taking into account there's additional special education rooms, and in this particular building, maybe even the possibility of a future autistic support or life skills room. So we don't want to build to the minimum. You want a couple extra classrooms so you have the ability to accommodate those things. Your current first grade class will be in 4th grade, September 2025. So that's kind of the timeline for whatever you want to do. September 2025, additional students are arriving in this building. And as I said before, just consider future expansion looking forward 5, 10, 20 years. You want to make sure that you have the ability to do that. So the first option we looked at is actually pretty straightforward. If you could find leased space, could you take the district offices that are currently here, Could you move them to another facility? Could you then renovate the spaces currently occupied, which would be this row of classrooms across here, all the way around this boardroom? Could they be renovated into classrooms? They were classrooms at one time when the building originally opened, so you basically would be taking them back. It would net you 14 additional classrooms. You would have the ability maybe to take the administration that's up on the second floor right now down to the first floor. That doesn't necessarily keep visitors out of the corridor system of the building, but you could get the administration down to where the visitors are coming in. Normally, the administration doesn't want to be down isolated from students, but if you're filling in classrooms on the first floor, they would be with the students. Essentially, the whole building would be a school again. The district office wouldn't be here. One obvious challenge with that is you'd have to find that lease space. And secondly, that would not only be the initial cost of finding that lease space, but it would be an annual cost every year. We listed the prices, the projected cost estimates in a range. This was listed as 8 to 10 million. I just want to explain a little bit what that is. We are very, very preliminary in this investigation. So we do have some contingencies in here. There's a lot that we don't know about these projects. And we're essentially telling you what to budget today. We're not telling you what to spend. As we go forward, we would be able to refine those costs. It would no longer be in a range. And hopefully, I would hope we might be able to work those numbers down. I hope I have enough in it that we're not talking about working those numbers up. So we try to have a little extra in all of these as we go forward. I would also say with this option, I'm projecting if you renovated everything, you could gain 14 classrooms. Remember, again, the target was 8 to 10. So if somebody said, hey, we want to let 4 classrooms go for the future, just let those rooms sit the way that they are, you could do that and reduce this cost a little bit. So that was the first design option. The second one is a different approach. The second one puts a very small...
Can I interrupt you for 1 second, please?
Please.
So with all of these options, we do have adding air conditioning to the auditorium and gymnasium as part of the 5-year capital. So that is part of every option that we're laying out here.
Yes, thank you.
So every option would include putting AC in the auditorium and the gymnasium.
And that's part of the cost.
That's part of that budgeted number that we're throwing out there now. Again, not the exact cost, or like Kevin said, that we're suggesting we spend that much, but it's just a number that's there for now.
Thank you.
The parts of the building that we see now.
They are the only 2 parts without AC right now.
Joe, what about the wrestling area? Does that have air conditioning?
It does not, so I should apologize. The only 2 parts that are actually utilized.
Right. So we have to add something for up there if we use that space.
If we utilize that space as part of the option, yes.
Thank you. So the next option was putting a very small addition on the entrance that faces towards the varsity baseball field. So it would essentially be this entrance over here. Basically, it would take away the canopy, it would take away a little piece of the corridor, and would put a 2-story addition in there. It's trying to achieve 2 things. One, it's building a bridge to that wrestling room. The wrestling room up on the second floor is, as I understand it, completely unutilized. If somebody's utilizing it, it's just because there's space there. We can't do anything with it because we can't get anybody up there. It's not accessible. But if we could build a link from the second floor here over to that wrestling room, then we could develop that space. We could use the elevator that's in this building. We basically connect those 2 spaces together. The second thing the addition is trying to do is manage all the public interaction for this building. So whether you would be coming to visit the district office or you'd be coming to visit the school office, everyone would enter through that area and there would no longer be visitors walking through the corridor system of the building. There's a couple of challenges with it. One, it's a very complicated little addition. It has an elevator and a stair tower. It's linking 2 floors together. It's doing partial demolition of the existing building, and it's surrounded by existing building on 3 sides. We can manage that. It's a complicated little addition, but we can manage it. The second challenge is we just took the entrance to the building and put it on the side of the building. And generally, we try to put entrances to buildings on the front. So this one also carries a couple other thoughts along the southern edge of the building, and it's up on this is the lower level here, but all the way across between the building and the varsity baseball field, there might be a canopy system There might be signage out here. There would be something that would direct people, this is the new entrance to the building. We're also suggesting that there could be some convenience parking right outside of it, and maybe a turnaround for parents. So basically get the parents to circulate through this loop, drop off students here, turn around and go back out again, and provide a little convenience parking. We were concerned that right now the buses go around the building, and we didn't want to mix cars and buses. So if the bus is parking somebody in, somebody's trying to back out, they're trying to get past the buses, something we want to avoid. So keep all the automobiles back here, and then possibly introduce a new way of stacking the buses. This is basically saying take out that little sidewalk landscape island between the first row of parking and the drop-off lane, park the buses chevron style all the way across here. This is actually accommodating, I think it's 20 buses. I'm again going to say something that probably everybody in this room understands. All your K-5 buses start here in the afternoon. They pick up, they go out to the elementary schools. So even though we're showing 20 buses across here, that's not all of them. White Marsh buses would probably have to stage and do a second run. Probably puts all the buses at their elementary schools at about the same time, given how close White Marsh is to this facility. But that would basically change the circulation on the site and allow this to function a little better as an addition. On the lower level, anyone coming to visit the district office would come into an entrance. There'd be a waiting room, there'd be conference rooms, there would be a reception area. That's as far as they'd go into the building. On the upper level, same thing. I mentioned there'd be a stair tower, there'd be an elevator, there'd be access to the second floor. I've never done a second floor entrance before in a school, but in this particular case, it would be a way of getting visitors confined to that waiting area, that conference room, manage all your public interaction right there. We've essentially, I forgot to mention, we essentially took the administration that's right here and moved them to the perimeter wall so that we could manage that public interaction. We renovate what was administration into classrooms. We renovate the wrestling area into classrooms. And to get that extra classroom, we took the 2 science rooms that are up in this corner and renovated that into 3 classrooms. That's a renovation that was done 4 years ago to the stacks of science rooms on this side. It's not the most cost-effective way to get an extra classroom, but we got an extra classroom that way. So what this option nets is 8 additional classrooms, 1 small group instruction room, and we had this one priced at $11 to $13 million. Yes.
This diagram, does that involve taking away the children's playgrounds area blacktop to become parking slash?
It would have to be reorganized. So if I go back to the site plan, you're kind of seeing just a piece of it here. Put some hard play in here, next to that sports field. It did relocate it, yes.
That's something Joe was about. Did you extend the blacktop that way?
So there is a covenant for the rear of the building, so we would be limited in what we could do, but we would have to open that again with the township. So the covenant, I believe, was when we swapped the properties. So I think you'll recall when the property by Joshua, the old detention basin back by Victory, the FMC, that property belonged to the district, and this belonged to the township. So we just did a property swap with an agreement that we wouldn't expand for the neighbors on the right or do anything there. But passing through and building on is totally different. So it could be something that was negotiable that we could work out, but it would definitely be another step that we'd have to go through.
And to his question, I think I heard you say hard play. Is that what you said, like a hard play area, or did you say hard skate?
Hard play.
Hard play.
For, we would have courts, but
No, I got you, but I didn't mean the surface. What you say about is the surface, just because obviously you can't build something, but you could put something down.
Right, you have to have some asphalt.
So
Correct. Yeah.
the wording of the covenant agreement wasn't terribly specific on what it meant. We know we can't build on it, but there is still a conversation to be had about even paving a portion of it. I believe a portion of it is paved with asphalt right now.
It is.
So it didn't seem like that much of a stretch, but it is something that will have to be revisited with the township.
And the players in the township have all changed. And the development in the township has created, part of what's created what we need. I would think they would try to work with us.
Yeah, I think the intent of the covenant or agreement was this back corner here, close to the homes. To
Right.
make sure that we didn't put in lights, that we didn't put in buildings in the back there.
It doesn't even allow us to use it as a playing field.
Right.
Only practice.
Practice,
Right.
play areas. We're somewhat confident we can come to an agreement with we're showing this as an option, but we want the board to be aware that it would necessitate some in-depth conversations, especially if it was the favored option. We should start having those conversations sooner than later. We also do recognize the importance of making sure that we preserve as much of the play surface out here for pickleball, gaga, basketball. That is a great, kids, we have a special event here and all the faculty has to park back here. The kids know as they pull up in their buses and they know, and that's obviously recess is an important time. So we know we have to replace that.
So the third option is kind of an obvious option. Can we put an addition onto the building? But as we started to talk about, there's limitations on this site. Trying to put an addition out front is difficult because it can't link up with a 3-story building. It can only link up with the gym and the auditorium, and we already have public interaction, people coming through that area, so the front area is very difficult to work with. The northern edge is right up against the property line. The southern edge is right up against the varsity baseball field, and the western side has that covenant agreement, and that line falls right here. And so we kind of looked at there's maybe one little corner that we might be able to put an addition on. It's dead away center field, so it has a little bit more area around it. We could put a 3-story addition there. We could just route the buses around the outside of it. Everything else could continue to function. We could keep that hard surface back here for play because the buses would be controlled as they're controlled now. The first floor of the addition could be district offices. That would free up possibly the people that are in this location across that back edge to create 4 classrooms across here. And on the second and third floor, we would pick up additional classrooms. We'd essentially lose 1, but we'd pick up 4 for a net of 3 per floor. Now, we could adjust that going forward in any number, but what this scheme winds up with is 10 additional classroom spaces. Doesn't really have anything for changing the way that people visit the building, but it does provide the additional classroom spaces that we're looking for. And this one's probably in a range of 14 to 16 million. I didn't mention it before, that's all in. That includes fees, that includes financing, that includes furniture, that's the construction bids, plus what we call soft costs. So anything else involved with the project are in those numbers. So that was the third option. The fourth option is predicated on the idea that this building was originally developed as a junior high school, and it has a much larger gymnasium than an elementary school would require. So what if we looked at that gymnasium and we developed a gymnasium that was appropriate for 4th and 5th grade, and we took the rest of that volume and we started talking about making a district office out of it. So it's essentially looking at a gymnasium here and a first floor development for district office here. And then on the second floor, that could occupy the same zone plus pick up that wrestling room. That would allow us to basically move the district office out of these spaces and develop that for additional classroom space. It would, if we wanted to, allow us to take the school office and move it downstairs, again, to be closer to that security checkpoint. We could develop that administration area into additional classrooms. The end result is that this scheme would eventually deliver 15 additional classrooms. Again, it wouldn't all have to be in one phase. You could leave a portion of it undeveloped, but you have the ability to get 15 additional classrooms. You have the ability to introduce a new entrance on the front of the building for district office so that visitors don't have to walk through the school in order to get to the district office. They come right in off the front of the building. And we're looking at a total project cost in the range of 17 to 20 million. So again, on the lower level, You'd wind up with the gymnasium, some development of district office on the first floor. Again, classrooms where the district office used to be, school administration in this location. And on the upper level, continuation, more district office. The area that we have designated for district office is within 1,000 square feet of the area that it currently occupies. So it would just be a recasting of those spaces. It would certainly fit. The last thing that I just want to go over is a timeline. The timeline is a little hard to come up with because there's 4 different options. So different options will affect the timeline in different ways, but just in a general standpoint, and this one is probably more written around the option 4 because we think that that one probably has the longest timeline. But just thinking about some gestation period, some decision-making period for the board to get to a point that you might be able to give direction and say, this is what we want to do, maybe target the month of June for that. Doesn't necessarily have to be June, but just to sort of pick a time and come up with a timeline. 7 months of development. This could be extended on anything that would have land development associated with it. If we have to get a township approval because we're changing the site, that could go longer. If we're talking about option 1, we don't need 7 months. That's probably 3 months to just develop offices at the classroom spaces. There would be a bidding and procurement period. That's a particular challenge right now because materials are still a little bit difficult to get. So we'd want to make sure that we get the materials to the contractors before they start. And then a construction period that would start in the summer of 2024. If it was the option 4, 2024 would be the time that we would rebuild the gymnasium, construct the wall, build the floor, so that we have a safe place for PE the next year. And then you would have the first half of the school year to finish the district office, to move the people from the current office into the new district office. Second half of the school year, you renovate this district office into classrooms, and end in the summer of 2025, where you could do anything that students block access to. So it is more than a year construction process, but again, it's 2 renovations and the need for 2 summers. That takes you to September 2025, where we started the presentation. That's when your current first grade class lands at Colonial Elementary. So 4 different options. I think there are 4 very different options. Each carry their own pros and cons and each have their own price tag, but it's just a informational meeting. I don't know if there's any questions or comments. Yes.
I just have a question with respect to either any of those options. When we have construction workers on site, are all of those options relatively simple to keep the construction workers separate from the students, or is it more challenging for one than the other?
I think they're all about even, given that we should be able to get the contractors onto this floor to be able to renovate around here. Anything we do in the gym, we'd start with building that wall and making the separation. So I think they all have workable scenarios. Probably the thing I'm most worried about is any scheme that would try to renovate these office areas into classrooms while the classrooms above are being occupied. And it's not an issue of mixing students and contractors, it's the noise, So we would want to look at that. And there's options to do things second shift. We obviously want to get the most out of the summers that we possibly can. But yeah, any of the ones that wind up using these classrooms, that would probably be the challenge, would be the noise.
You got to practice at the high school.
I'm sorry?
You got to practice
Oh,
at the
yeah.
high school, keeping everybody separated for a very long period of time.
The high school was 9 phases to get around that building in little chunks, and we always kept everyone separated. And I know there was obviously a little bit of noise, but we managed it.
Regardless of new construction or renovation, all the construction workers once they're on campus are required to have all the appropriate clearances.
And then how much square footage is required for the district office?
So right now, we're looking at a number between 14 and 15,000 square feet. And again, that's not with, again, Dr. Christian and Mark and myself, we've all talked about, is that the absolute need? We would review that number, but what we currently have is in that range.
And then, if any idea what a ballpark, leased space, like how much a month that would be, or,
Getting numbers from 25 to 35 hours a square foot.
I have a question. And so I know that we're focused on the first grade for right now in the district. But when a project ends is about the time where you're going to get your pandemic home, right? So obviously you don't want to shoot to, I know you said 8 to 10, but it seems like it wouldn't be prudent to just go 8 to 10 when we kind of feel like there's going to be an additional project that has to be done to get us ready for like 2028, 2029.
Right, and I think it's key to mention that the middle school and the high school could handle the enrollment level. So this is the, as we stated earlier, this is the only other school where all the students come together.
The bare minimum, it really would be a minimum, I'm not even comfortable saying this, would be 6 to 8 classrooms, because if you look at 150 kids, that's 6 classrooms. Well, that's during the day, your primary teacher who is handling, here they too, but you're handling your language arts and your math or science and social studies. Once you add that many teachers, you're adding specialists, right? Art, music, so you need to be mindful of that. Undoubtedly, those students who have special education needs, so you're adding a resource room, so that's where you get 6 to 8. Right now, Rich Park has 3 autistic support classrooms. We anticipate potentially a 4th one next year, probably in another elementary school, but they're all feeding into the 4-5 school. And the ratio for students in receiving autistic support is far lower than students receiving special education services and itinerant support. In fact, it's 8 to 1. At White Marsh Elementary School, we have our life skills program, and so obviously students feed to the 4-5 level. So that's where we were talking to Kevin, the realistic number probably is 10, and perhaps even 11 or 12 when you're talking about needing students who receive additional services for English language learners, for reading support. It's not, we're not interested in building just to say we have those rooms. The rooms will get utilized. And so when we look at those different options, we looked at not only what was coming in the first grade, but what was coming in early intervention and the trends that we're seeing in education.
Having seen what we did, two different renovations to this building already.
Correct.
And in hindsight, you look back and you go, well, why didn't we plan better? Years ago, you do what you need to do. I feel really strongly that if we're going to do this and disrupt the building and make lots of changes, number one, we should have an exterior entrance to district office that doesn't come through the school. I think that's incredibly important. And I think we need to plan for the worst, which is a whole lot more students. We don't want to spend $12 million and then say we're 2 classrooms short. So in my view, I know it's easy to say let's spend the money, but in my view we need to plan big, because everything seems to be increasing around here. And I don't want to see us a couple classrooms short.
And if you plan big, Kevin, I think you and Dr. Christian and I all spoke, I think that we know that at that point we're maxed here. I think that option 4 pretty much says we're
Well, and then that
max.
makes us like the middle school and the high school, all 3 buildings can handle
Exactly.
what we need. So that's where I'm leaning. I just think that anything else is being short-sighted.
So in looking at the 5-year plan, the last time we looked at it, there was a consideration that we might need to build a new building on the bus road. So my train of thought currently is, if we look at it that way, if we had rentals lease space for the district office for the interim, could we incorporate the district office in a new building that we might, be building in the future?
Great question. It certainly is worthy of investigating. If we're looking at the property where the depot is, your buildable acreage there is somewhat confined. So you're really looking at a fairly smaller elementary school. So that's just off the top of my head. There was some work we can do with the Army Corps of Engineers to get the wetlands shrunken. That's a process. We did some preliminary work on that. On that back end, it's 23.5 acres. The depot's on about 11. We lose about 6. I think there's about 4.5, 5 acres. Maybe 6.
It was about 6 buildable acres back there, and we thought that if we went and we reinvestigated the water issue there, that we might be able to gain an acre or 2. But that when we looked at that originally, the cost to even start investigating it to come up with an acre, and we didn't really have a plan, wasn't worth our time.
How many acres is this site?
24 is total. I think 23 point something acres is what's.
Joe, my math skills aren't real great. The number on the leasing, you said was how many square feet we need at what, 25 to 35? What was the total? Did you do the math?
So I think we said at 13, we did $13,030, just trying to call it a medium. I think that was like 390,000 a year.
I just want to echo what Chris mentioned around like thinking about another school. But I mean, again, I don't know how much inspiration has gone into that yet. But when you're talking about 1,000 kids in a 4 or 5 setting, that's rather large. And so I don't know. I mean, I think it's something worth exploring.
Except that the other building would be a K-3, is what we've talked about, not another 4 or 5.
Right.
If we build another building, it could be another K.
It would be to alleviate the pressure in the K-3 building.
Right, so we still have all this, all 4 or 5 in the same place.
Yeah, I mean, I just like logistically, when you start talking about that many kids, buses, administration, I mean,
Sure.
would we be adding a second principal, a co-principal model or something like that?
The third person.
Yeah, I mean, however, so
Right.
I just think that number in one space is a lot in and of itself. From a safety point of view, I don't
Sure.
know what that looks like. But I think it's worth exploring other options.
What we can do too is we can put together a little executive summary of how we use our spaces in the K-3 buildings to give you an understanding of where we have space and where we're getting reached. And then we're getting the enrollment study from probably within a week or 2. They gave us some preliminary numbers on kindergarten, but they're still finalizing the K-12 numbers. 4 years ago, we had to do a quick renovation here because we had an anomaly of a class, the current 6th grade, that entered, and they were just huge. And so we renovated the old locker rooms here. That project we got done in 3.5 months. I mean, actually 3 months. We started the day after the kids were done in June, and created 4 classrooms out of some unused space, essentially. Knowing that down the road that we had classes that were in the 375 to 390 for the next few years. And then obviously now that current 1st grade is bigger. So that we can put together, give the board a little context of how we use our spaces. We have a plan for each of our elementary schools for the next 2 years, but that plan's as good as your enrollment predictions, right? And life is what happens despite the plans. And this continues to be a very attractive market for families. It just simply does.
I know that's been stated, I mean, Sue mentioned it, but I know that out of the plans that take the main entrance away from intermingling with students is definitely on the top of my list. As well as I do like the idea that from a safety response or surveillance even aspect, it's nice to have everything on on the same campus, you have more control of, how people get in and out of your roadways. I think you add more schools, and then you have to figure out, like, how do you integrate them all into the same plan as well, so.
And I was gonna ask from an administrative standpoint, do you prefer being, I think as a parent, I like that the administration is here on campus, close to the high school, interacting, but how do you guys feel about where your administrative offices are located?
Selfishly, the best part of that day is 10:30 every morning, because that's when recess starts outside. I can hear the kids and stay involved. The good part about this district, though, it's an excellent point, is that no matter where we are, we're close to a building. In my previous setting, it was 111 square miles, so no matter where you were 20 minutes from somebody. Here you might be 20 minutes, but that's because of traffic, not because you're not within a mile.
Joe, we looked, I don't know how many years ago, at renting space when we renovated this building.
Yes, when we moved to Conshohocken Elementary here.
We looked at we had space planned, or I guess we did move for a while.
We moved for almost 2 years to Brandywine, right?
Right at Butler and Germantown. And, it was okay, but I don't know that it was optimal.
Right.
And it was expensive.
It was, but, I risk my job when I say this because Dr. Christian is my boss. I have to remind him, he doesn't care where he goes, but I keep telling him we have to do it for a superintendent. So he'll go wherever you guys tell him to go.
And he doesn't need that big an office.
He won't take it either. But I keep reminding him that, the challenges for the board that might be that you guys are, you want to have things for a superintendent.
Kevin, could you just go through, regardless of the scenario that the board will consider, because obviously we're going to revisit this over the next few months. Can you just go through the timeline again? Obviously we know we want to be prepared for the fall of 25.
Mhm.
But what are the major steps that we have to decide in the next 12 months?
So, the first thing is just coming up with a direction between these four options or some combination of the options. Deciding which direction the district wants to go. And then there's a planning period. And as I mentioned before, if there's land development involved, we would need to plan out amongst ourselves enough that we could get a civil engineer engaged and make submissions to the township. That process, if it goes to full land development, can be quite time consuming. And what I was talking about with buses and parent loops, if you disturb more than an acre, now you got the county conservation district involved. So that process can get strung out to a full year, if it goes that full route. So we would do our planning through that period. We would document the project. We would put it out for bids with contractors. Bids would come in. You'd hire a contractor, and then I talked about a procurement period, a period of time where contractors could order their materials before they start construction. And that's...
We would most likely want to get out to bid by February, March of 24. Is that fair?
Yeah, according to that, I think we're saying the end of January. So it'd be the end of that blue line is falling January 2024. Now,
For the board, we need to have a decision by the fall.
yeah, we marked June. We might have been a little bit optimistic. We could certainly work to the fall. You really don't want to be too much later than that. If you're selecting options that involve adding a story on the inside of the gymnasium, that's a little bit more involved than a scenario that might say just renovate these offices into classrooms.
So what I think we should provide to the board is, first, take any questions the board has over the next week or two. Make sure everybody has ample time to look at the four different options, answer your questions, and then put together some additional data related to enrollment, how we use the K-3 buildings. Definitely have this as an agenda topic for the May FMT. And then, really, once you hit May, when you get close to graduations, things get a little crazy, but there's nothing that prevents us from having a summer FMT meeting and really get, we don't want to lose time just because it's over the summer.
When you present that data, can you present it a little bit differently than it's presented here, where it shows the benefits and the opportunities for each option. Only because we talked a lot about what those benefits and options are, so they would be easy to see it in like a matrix form so that we understand what those benefits are. And then my other question is, you said we're getting the enrollment study in a week or so. Does that change the options at all? Does it add an option? Does it eliminate an option? What are we thinking in that, from that perspective? So it could be, this is like based off of the enrollment study, this option doesn't make sense at all, so we're taking that off. Or, hey, now we need another option.
Certainly, we could do that. We could add a plus delta for each of the options. And that's no problem.
So one last question for me. Of the 4 options that you presented tonight, one being the quickest, least painful, having to get approvals to the longest, what's the order? Is it in that 1, 2, 3, 4 order that you already have?
No, they probably weren't arranged based on length. 1 is clearly the shortest.
Right.
The site work is probably the critical path, so option 2 probably had the most site work. That one probably takes the longest just because of that approval process.
Okay.
In terms of construction, I'd say option 4 was the most involved in terms of construction.
Design construction. The option 4 doesn't involve any external building. Option 2 involves a lot of site work because you're putting additional, basically moving the front entrance. Is there a scenario where some of the additional work on the site on from plan 2 gives you additional usable space if you're doing that as part of site 4? Like where you don't have to reroute the buses because the entrance is still in the front. But like, is there additional space that can be gained with addition what we're doing to option 4 theoretically?
I'm not sure I quite followed. Are you asking if option 2 could be combined with option 4?
Sort of the space that you're gaining on option 2, like the additional building that's being done.
Right,
If option 4 looks like you're maximizing the internal space.
right.
If the additional external space for option 2 gives us something, if we're doing option 4 as well, so then we don't have to redo the entrance, and that space that was in an entrance, is that functional space or is that just kind of stairwells and elevators?
Is which functional space?
The new construction part of option 2.
If we combine it with, I'm sorry if I'm not following it. If we're combining it with option 4?
So theoretically,
Pause, why don't you pull up?
yeah, design option 2, the blue in the building there is new space.
Yes.
So that additional space, if you're doing option 4, is there any benefit to doing it? Because you're not adding the entrance there, it's not the primary entrance, it's just additional space that we theoretically could build on the property without changing anything. Is that an option that exists or not? Just trying to think maximize, if we're doing the project once, what's the most you can get?
Okay. Are you talking about doing an addition like this and filling in the gymnasium?
In that part, is there an advantage to doing that?
Oh, it would certainly be an interesting thought. I would actually say you could do option 4. Option 4 has its own entrance into the district office up front. Option 2, we were going to try to do the complicated addition that would get you to the second floor. At the point that you develop the first floor for classrooms, there's no reason to do that. Bring the administration down to the first floor and put an entrance there. Is that what you were describing?
Right.
Yes, option 4 could benefit from, let's go to option 4. So that would be the combination of 2, where option 4 would say, this is going to now be the administration. I'm going to sort of celebrate that, put a canopy, some signage. I'm going to get people back here. Maybe consider the possibility of getting some convenience parking and a parent loop and put the buses out front. Yes, that would manage all the interaction into the building. No visitor would get any further than a waiting room and a conference room. And it probably wouldn't add that much money to this option other than dealing with that site work issue, which...
Right, but then that would still require moving the buses in.
Right, and whatever, again, that 1 acre trigger becomes the significant thing.
Having lived through getting approvals at the township for our fields,
Yeah. I think that's definitely, I
It's a
think to
huge
Cal's
jump.
point, like trying to break it down so you could see it and the impact that each option could potentially have. we wouldn't need that if we went with this option. And whatever the options may be, because there is that timeline, and Mark and I really are whispering about the Phillies game, we're whispering about that timeline. That, just, giving everyone ample opportunity to put a good project together so that we get a good bid and we get a good project that has an opportunity to come on budget. That time frame just gets a little bit scary for us that, we don't want to sit here later and say to you guys, well, now we need more money. So we want to make sure whatever we're deciding, you guys, we know that timeline if that gets extended, can get risky from that perspective.
If,
Hearing what you described, it's not, there's no, I think I'm wrong, but then there wouldn't be an actual benefit, so.
I like the combination. I mean, from a standpoint of managing public interaction, it would be an advantage. From the timeline, it would be a little bit more complicated.
My goal would be to avoid the site work, I think, being able to do internally.
Let me also say, we talked about site work, 1 acre disturbed, county conservation district, and how that can expand everything. There is a scenario here where you do a renovation and just the additions. You keep it less than 1 acre disturbed, you get your approval on that, and then the site work becomes a second project. That basically, if the approval process runs long, you can still accommodate the students arriving to the building, and you just follow up the following summer with the site work. I've done that already.
So it would be like middle school, if you think about it, right? We didn't have the site work, so we had a different pattern, so we could get double that site work done in front of the building.
Real quick, with making the gym smaller, how much smaller, and if, I think Dr. Christian made the point of, if we have to have multiple specialists teaching, like in the middle school, I know they have 2 or 3 gym classes going at the same time. Would the gym still be big enough to handle if we needed 2
We
classes?
talked about that. It still needs to be a middle school size gym that has a divider. That gym is huge.
Yeah.
So those of you who remember the old middle school, that gym here, the gym here dwarfs the old middle school gym. So recapturing some of that space for offices, we don't see it as a challenge.
Okay, great.
And that is the layout of a middle school basketball court on that gymnasium.
Included, if the gym is included in the final decision, we would redo the whole floor of the gym anyway. So not only it would be a little bit smaller, but it would be a brand new surface. Very attractive for the school.
And it would have a divider, like we
Yep.
have in the high school.
Yes.
And larger densities, 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, we still have covered that either in the auditorium or the gym. Because 5th grade promotions usually outside to the track now.
It's outside at weather permitting. We can fit a whole grade in there. We can't fit both grades currently, so they have 2 assemblies. But this auditorium is fantastic, so adding the AC to it would even be better because right now Ridge Park has their concerts here, and I think Plymouth is going to move over next year. It's just better so we can allow all the aunts, uncles, grandparents, extended family. I think there was some hesitancy originally, but now people love it. So it's worked out really well.
Yeah, thank you. This was a great presentation. A lot to think about.
Thank you.
So we will put together, take all the board's comments tonight, we'll put together a packet of information for the board, as well as Mark will work on the financial impact, including the potential for leasing space, so that the true cost over a 5, 10, 15-year period. And then we'll revisit it. I think we'll try to hone some of if board members have additional questions, please email Joe and me, and then we'll meet with you, Kevin, and we'll try to narrow down some of the options. And let's take a look at that 2 and 4 combination to see if there's something
Yeah,
there.
I like that.
And I want to compliment Joe, and quite frankly myself, because we have our favorites and we resisted saying we will not resist in many. I can tell you that.
Like you did mention earlier about staff as well, so can we include that? There's additional staffing needs.
Certainly.
All right, can you give us your favorites? That was going to be one of the questions.
Mark's not going to like hearing this, nor would Dave Zablowski, but I liked 4 when I saw it. But I think 1 would work as well. I think the reason I like 4 is because I think it helps the district over the next 25, 30 years. So the board's been very conscientious in my time here about it's how it allocates funds. It's never easy. We don't have debt service coming off anytime soon, so we'd have to be creative in how to do this. But I think it is, for the long term, I think it is a very attractive approach. I didn't like 2 originally, but I'm liking it more and more. So I think I like the concept of separating the entrances. And I think the board does too. I don't know what was your preference.
Did you say 1 though, Dr. Christian?
What's that?
1 is moving the district offices offsite. We're not saying that. You like that idea?
I liked it for the cost effectiveness and the fact that this is just, I like where this space is becoming classrooms because the library and the cafeteria are right here.
So cost effectiveness, if it's $400,000 a year, for 10 years, you just got us $4 million that we could add on to one of the other options. Just saying.
Joe, what were your feelings?
She got me on.
No, I do really like the art administration. I feel like that helps with the community feel and the closeness of, everybody working together. So I feel like that's having our administration in our schools, physically in our schools. I know you guys are out in the schools every day, but living here, everything says a lot about what we value. So I think that's pretty important.
I think I like the 4th option from the perspective that being here for many years and the people that you see coming in the front door sometimes just to get to the district office or just to get back to HR is really uncomfortable to watch people make that walk through the building proper when they could go right through a main entrance and get to the district office and not be where the students are. That's something that's always personally always given me my own little agita. Just you see people walking and you wonder where they're walking, where they're going. And so it does set us up with the most classrooms for the future. I think it maxes out the building. So if we did experience another enrollment bubble, we would know, well, we're maxed out at Colonial Elementary School. There's no more to go. Plus, I don't think the cost of construction is getting any cheaper. So I think the reality is if we kick the can down the road, the small renovation for adding 4 more classrooms later may be not economically appropriate. We might want to look at it that way. But I agree with Dr. Christian and Kevin. I appreciate Kevin's work. And Dr. Christian and Mark, and I said it to him, that there's not a ton of options because you are kind of landlocked to speak the way the design of the building is and how do you get to the actual 2nd and 3rd floor when you can't do it from either front corner of the building, right? So, again, we appreciate the work. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Mark, we don't want to know what you think.
No, ironically, I think if we're going to do if we're going to take a construction project, we need to do what's the most beneficial to the district in the long term. There's no point in putting a Band-Aid on it. Like you said, you can rent something at 25 to 35 hours a square foot. It's a rental. So, but I think there's some interesting options. I think there's some, interesting financing things we can do. We'll start talking to some of the, our other partners. But we'll go from there.
Well, this is your test for like your first month here is
Ready to go.
you passed. You passed, you didn't pick the cheapest option.
So if there's no other questions for Kevin or on the topic, that was the actual only thing on the agenda this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Nice to see you.
Good to see you.
Any additional comments from the board? Any questions or anything from the public comment? Is there any public comment or anything? No?
Just one thing real quick. I think, the timeline, I think maybe that's something, though, I do feel like we should stick to a pretty strict timeline and, as someone who just renovated their house, how things pop up and take longer than expected. So I think if we can get, before the summer, before vacations start,
Okay.
I think that would be great.
No? All right. Well, with that, we're adjourned.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter. I'm going to present from up here tonight, just having some computer issues, hope that's okay. But tonight we're here for the Finance Committee for April 10th. It's going to be two parts. We have our 2023-2024 final proposed budget. We'll go over that first, and then we'll go over the current year 2022 to 2023 actual. Just as a reminder, our current millage at 24.395 is third lowest in the county. Only above Wissahickon at 22.45 and Upper Marion at 21.46. As it stands right now, the Act 1 index, as stipulated by PDE for Colonial School District, was set at 4.1%. Due to Colonial's very low aid ratio, there is no additional multiplier, so we are maximum, the most we can raise our millage would be the 4.1%. If we were to raise up to the full maximum index of 4.1% compared to our millage of 24.395, that would give us actually a full mill increase, allowing us to go to a maximum of 25.395. Long story short, 1 mil would bring in about $4.25 million in additional revenue by going up to the 4.1%. The budget obviously is comprised of two sides. We have our revenues, projected revenues, as well as projected expenditures. We're going to start in the beginning here to talk over our projected revenue for 23 and 24. As you can see, our projected revenue is broken down into 4 different buckets. We have our local, state, federal, and other. Our local for 2023-2024 is projected to be $1,291,294,148. The state revenue is projected to be $25,040,664. Federal is $1,930,735, and other miscellaneous of $1,000. So our total projected revenue for 2023 for 2024, as of today, is set at $148,266,547,000. This is an increase over prior year budget of $4,065,780, which equates to about 2.82% increase. So that is the view from 10,000 feet, but how do we get there? We get there from looking at these approximate 9 different line items. Current real estate taxes. We are a very fortunate district to have the residential and commercial tax base that we have. The current budget as it stands for 2023-2024 for real estate taxes is set at $100,023,648. This assumes no tax increase. This is an increase just based off of as the assessments have been coming in for the last 9 months. These are the changes that we have seen, and this is what we implemented through the budget. These numbers do not account for any assessment changes for the month of April, just due to the timing for when we will receive the reports from the 3 different townships. We did not have time to effectuate that in these numbers. They would be presented in subsequent Finance Committee and board meetings. But as you can see, of the $4 million in increase in projected revenues, 2.2, so a little bit more than half, is just in our real estate taxes alone. State revenue, which is comprised obviously of basic education, special education, other types of subsidy fundings from the state, such as the reimbursement of PESers and the reimbursement of the FICA tax revenue, has been increased by $544,040. The budget is set at $25,040,664. Now we're still waiting on Governor Wolf and the Commonwealth to approve their budget. Shapiro. There you go. Get that first one out of the way, all right? So we're still waiting on Shapiro to finalize his budget. From conversations we've had with other colleagues in PASBO, as well as PASBO officials, there's a lot of just unknown as to what's going to come down the pipe with the prior governor, Governor Wolf, infusing a lot of the federal money and the COVID money into the basic education formula. Governor Shapiro is now he's now asking for approximately $572 million more in additional state funding, or in basic education funding, and another $72 million in special education funding. So you're looking at $650 million that he's trying to institute more into the basic education formula. Now, Colonial School District would be obviously a piece of that, and we look at a share, but until they pass something, we want to just make sure we're budgeting our revenues at what's known, which is what we received in this prior year. So again, we're still, increasing about a little bit more than $500,000. Act 1 earned income taxes. Again, we have a very strong worker tax base in our district, so we increased that by about $300,000. Other local revenues increased $290,000. This is comprised of interest income, amusement taxes, rental facilities. We have a couple pilot agreements, payment in lieu of tax agreements with certain nursing homes in the area. So we increased that almost $300,000. Transfer taxes, while the real estate market is somewhat slowing up as far as turnover, we're not seeing what we did in 2020, 2021, where some properties were turning over 2 or 3 times in a year. We still believe that transfer taxes will be strong, for our district going forward. Delinquent taxes, again, we look at our delinquent lien reports. We work with our tax collectors. We look to see what's outstanding, and then we also look at historical trends that we've talked about, looking at trend analysis for these type of revenues. We've increased that about $500,000. Federal revenue is not only our title programs, but also our COVID money. This is going to be approximately the last year of COVID. We have until September of 2024 to spend all of our COVID money. So we have, basically a whole another full year of COVID funding that will be taking advantage of this year. IDA and interim real estate taxes remain flat. So the budget for 2023 from a projected revenue standpoint, as we just mentioned, is $4,065,780 greater than prior year. So that's the good news as far as inflows go. Budget considerations. On the other opposite side of it, now we have to look at the expenditures for the district. Like Dr. Christian and Mr. Lally spoke about earlier, student enrollment. It's coming down the pipe at all of our buildings, not just the elementaries, but the middle school. We plan on using the enrollment report that we'll receive from statistical forecasting, in the next couple of weeks to, really analyze what our needs are from the student population. As our student population increases, obviously, as Ms. Plant said earlier, we have to start looking then at personnel. Enrollment goes up, personnel will need to go up. Teaching, security, kind of across the board, we just need to look at everything. Retirement, we take into account any recent retirements that we've been notified of through HR to implement that into the budget so we can take advantage of those savings. Other factors affecting wages and salaries is our collective bargaining agreements with our different unions, our employee benefits such as healthcare, medical vision, dental, and prescription, our pension costs, which is a state mandated cost, and then other various health benefits. As we've talked about in previous conversations, special education, as our enrollment grows up, there's always going to be a portion of that is then tied to special education needs, charter schools, one-to-one aids, that's a factor of our enrollment increasing. VOTEC tuition, which we've talked about previously, with the increased enrollment at the VOTEC, from this year to last year, we're looking at almost $1 million increase on that VOTEC. It's a great program. It's bringing more and more kids in there. We just have to pay our fair share for that enrollment increase. Charter schools, as we've talked about the last couple weeks, last couple months, our charter school expenditures year to date for this year alone have already amassed the budget. That's just based off the number of kids that are enrolling in these charter schools with special education needs, aids, and these are district contractually required expenditures. Obviously, then use of fund balance is always the variable. Do we want to use fund balance? Do we not want to use fund balance to help balance the budget? We also need to take into account our construction projects. Our AAA bond rating, is dependent on fund balance and growth. So it's all a piece of this moving puzzle here. Just a quick summary of our personnel, wages, and benefits that are in the 2023-2024 budget. We're looking at approximately 70.39% of our annual budget is related to personnel costs. This is salary and benefits. We are looking at adding 5 new full-time positions for the 23-24 school year. This consists of counselors, special education teachers, school nurses, and then a couple of regular education teachers. We have 6.
Mark, I'm going to just interrupt you just so the board recalls. At the curriculum meeting in the fall, we were introduced to new courses in our history program, social studies at the high school, as well as music. So we're anticipating 1.5 positions at the high school. The middle school is a few years ago, the board added teams in 7th and 8th grade to accommodate growth. We do anticipate the need of a special education teacher in the elementary division because of the increased size of the number of students who have IEPs and the services that have to be rendered. We anticipate a position at Plymouth Elementary. If you've driven past Plymouth and you see the development across the street, obviously we're seeing increased enrollment in there. And then we potentially will need a position potentially at White Marshall or Ridge in regular education there. We're not sure if we're waiting on the enrollment study, but to be safe, we put in 5 positions for the professional staff.
The next item is the health insurance as a part of the Bucksmont Consortium, which we are a self-funded school district. We are still waiting on the third look. The second look, as reported in the previous meeting, we had an increase in medical of 10.3%. We had a prescription decrease in premiums of 12.1%. For an overall increase of 7.2%. The third look should come in the next couple of weeks. That will be a factor of the overall budget that we'll have to effectuate through. But as soon as we get those numbers, we will push that through our benefits calculators. PSER's liability, as we've always talked about, it was 35.26 in 22-23. However, the state certified it to be down, actually decreased this upcoming year to a new rate of 34% for all PSER's eligible wages. So that is, or this next schedule kind of gives us our line item as to where we are as far as budget expenses between the 2 years. Salaries and wages, you can see the effective change was only $645,529, a little less than 1%. That's a cumulative of retirements as well as new hires. So we were able to just about have almost a little bit of a break even on that. Benefits obviously is up 4.5%, $1.7 million, which is an effect of the healthcare, which we previously just talked about. That will change based on the third look. Professional services, this is tied to our special education services, our aides, our behavioral therapists, anything out of Karen Burke's office in relation to pupil services. Contracted services, minimal increase, only $79,639, a 4.85% increase. Purchase services, this is the largest driving dollar figure from largest driving item from a dollar figure. You can see that it has increased from $15,716,119 to $17,763,633, an increase of a little bit more than $2 million and 13%. And what is driving that is, as we've talked about, the $1 million in the VOTEC is in there. We have an expectation that our transportation with the bus company gets back up to pre-COVID runs. Right now, we're still sitting at 70. We're hoping to, increase that, get back up to where we used to be, as well as special education, charter school enrollment. Those 3 items right there make up a majority of that $2 million sitting in that budget line item for 23-24.
We have administratively, we've talked about setting goals for next year. One is to, we started it through working with CEA to create our own cyber programs, and talk a little more about that, to draw back students who attend cyber charter schools. We're ready, we want to compete with all schools. We have a great program, but that's something that's certainly a goal of ours. But 2 things that are certainly, and secondly, the increase in the tech program is a great thing. The programs that they're offering are fantastic. I met with Dr. King recently with the other member school districts, and she's putting together plans to even increase enrollment, specifically as it relates to healthcare occupations and technology-related occupations. So I think they're on a very good path. And lastly, the board is aware transportation costs are going up. We have 1 more year in our agreement, but there's no way we can level fund that. We need to be prepared. There will be a spike. We're going to go out for an RFP. We're going to seek competition to drive the cost down, but we're paying less than most of the districts around us easily. And so the offers that we're receiving are, can't get into the negotiations in a public meeting, but we know we need to do an RFP to try to drive costs down. But it will go up regardless as we hope that we have more and more bus drivers every year, and we're willing to pay for them to reduce the amount of times the kids are on the bus and improve our service. But that's a factor that is absolutely going up. And that's going up for every district.
Yep. The last or the next couple items here, equipment. Just from a percentage standpoint, you'll see that it's up 90.43%, $220,000. That's driven not only just normal turnover of equipment purchases that we have to make, but we have 2 activity vans that we've been utilizing, 2 of our 4 activity vans that are just about on their last wheel, to be honest. One is purchased in 2005, the other one was purchased in 2007. These vans are used to transport our after-school activities, after-school athletics, as well as teams on the weekends. At the girls' basketball, I believe they went to Delaware the one weekend for a showcase. It's time to turn those vans over just because of from an age and deterioration. It's not financially responsible to keep investing money into them while we're just kind of putting a Band-Aid fix on it. You're putting duct tape on a rubber hose in the engine there. So we wanted to make sure we invested in those vans to make sure we can transport our students, appropriately. You'll see the interest and fees and debt service is relatively minimally increased. Interest and fees is only up about 0.9%, $59,000, while the debt service, and again, this is all tied to existing debt, amortizing debt that we've taken out for all of our projects, and investment in the district is up $126,122, 2.6%. I put that bottom line transfers on there. This would be a line item if we were to transfer money into the capital reserve fund, if we were to, invest money in our capital projects as a part of our overall, 5-year improvement plan, as well as, any projects or tying anything to the new CES renovations. So, long story short, we have all of our revenues being inflows, expenditures being outflows. What does that leave us with? That leaves us with revenues of $148,266,547, expenditures of $151,253,201, leaving the district in a deficit position for the year of $2,986,654. How do we fund that deficit? As it stands right now, it would require an increase in our millage of 2.9%. Still below the Act 1 index of 4.1, but that is how we would have to budget, or how we would have to balance the budget with a 2.9% increase. Just to give the committee some historical information as to where the district stands as far as what they've done with the tax rate as compared to what PD has allowed us to do in prior years. I know that this is a hot topic in the last few months with the Attorney General coming out with his report, so I wanted to make sure we just kind of put this out there. You'll see that predominantly the district is either under or at the Act 1 index. There was the 1 year in 2019-2020 where we went over by 1.6% because we filed the appropriate exceptions. Those exceptions were related to the increase in special education costs those years. And then you can see over the last couple years, we were below by about 1.73, 0.3%, and then flat in 2020, 2021. The 23-24 is marked at 2.9%, and that's just a proposed number, just in order to show how we would balance the budget and where we stand in connection to the Act 1 index. And you can see that we would be 1.2% below the maximum. So what's next? From a financial standpoint, we need to continue to monitor our student enrollment and kindergarten registration for any potential need for new positions. We will await the Commonwealth budget updates from Governor Shapiro, and then we'll continue to monitor our revenue projections related to assessment changes as they come in each month from our 3 different districts. Then the other slide I had before we get to, So the timeline actually is, with this being the Finance Committee for April, and this being the final proposed budget adoption presentation, we would look for the board to approve the final proposed budget adoption at the April 20th meeting. This would then allow us to make the final proposed budget public for the required minimum 30 days, with the May board meeting not being until May 25th. This would then allow for that timeline to satisfy that requirement. We're still allowed to open the budget back up. We're still allowed to review line items, make changes as necessary as we get more information, but this is kind of just the procedural we're following with the way the rest of the calendar is set right now. And then before we get into the discussion, I just want to pull up this one other, which we always like to have a general ideas. So the purpose of this schedule is to show what does a 2.9% increase do to not only the medium houses. Yeah, sorry about that, Chris. Yeah, I'm trying. Better? Yep. Okay. So let me just move up a little bit. So on a $100,000 assessment on a house, it would increase taxes $70.70. On the median income or a median assessed value of Colonial School District, it would increase by about $108.06. And on a $200,000 assessed value of a property, it would increase at $141.40. This would allow us to negate any use of fund balance and balance our budget using only tax dollars. You can see in the top right-hand corner of the screen, here's our total fund balance as of today, as of March 31st at $28,540,888. We are using $1 million of that to balance the current year 22-23 budget, leaving us with $27 million. So that is our fund balance as it stands right now. And then you can see on this slide how the balance of tax revenues and fund balance, equates to different percentages. If we were, just for an example, we wanted to move down to 2% increase, we would be looking at using a fund balance of $915,257. This is the sliding scale that we're working with right now. Obviously, as revenues or expenditures, may need to get tweaked over the next couple of weeks, this scale will change. But I know that this is an important measuring tool to have.
So if you scroll down your chart, if we wanted to have no tax increase, how much fund balance would we have?
So if we wanted to have no tax increase, we would have to use $2,986,654. We'd have to use the entire deficit.
Okay.
Yeah. I just didn't go below 1% because the font gets really small. Oh, no, yeah. There's,
I have a quick question. At the top, when you use the, I guess you said moderate or something.
median.
Median, okay. Is that actual median?
Yeah, that's what is being reported to us from the different townships. The word.
It's assessed value.
Yes, it's assessed value. Yeah. Okay. So I just thought, this is an important tool to have as you're looking down at each one of the tenths of a point there. If you were to go from 2.9 to 2.8, or even if you were to go every tenth of a point, you're looking at anywhere from $90,000 to $95,000 for every tenth. Now that gets a little bit bigger as you make your way down, but that's kind of the rule of thumb.
I understand what you're saying. I guess in my mind, I was thinking someone sitting at home so they better understand what their problem is.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah.
Okay.
So as we're planning 2 years out, this year and next year, expense-wise, things I see that are kind of on the horizon where we're in a $3 million deficit, say, given this year. The VOTAC is only going to go up because of the 3-year weighted average.
Yeah.
The latest year of that is the one that's dropping off next year. So assuming our enrollment stays current, or even dips a little bit, our VOTAC expenditures are going up again next year. The Pacers, the state has already said that it was not going to continue, it's go back up, correct?
Unfortunately, most likely, I'm going to qualify the statement, but most likely it will go higher than the 34% next year. It will not stay flat, I can tell you that.
The first student, or the busing.
As Dr. Christian knows, going out to an RFP, that's going to require investment.
The federal funding, that money's going to basically all go away, but that should correspond with programs
Yes.
that were created just to use that money, so that won't necessarily, even though that's $2-ish million.
Right. So we, as an administration, we decided when the COVID money came in that we were not going to fund continuing expenditures. We were going to, invest that money in, items supplies, masks, PPE, summer academies, learning loss to bring our kids back up to where, the educational needs were.
Technology was.
Right, technology was a huge one. That was a large investment, but yeah.
And the last one being in the recent court ruling that the current funding formula is unconstitutional.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have any real clarification on what's going to come.
No, that one's going to take a couple years to push through. And again, the court ruled in a 787-page document that it was unconstitutional, but didn't provide any type of formula or methodology to go about how doing it. So PDE and PASBO and all the other 500 school districts are basically just left waiting to see what happens. There was talk that the state would be required to fund a separate education fund like they've done in South Carolina and New Jersey, but that's at the state level. And as far as Pennsylvania goes, I think we're in the very, very early beginnings of what's going to happen with that.
So this is a good question, which is, so if we were to say this year, and inflation, we're seeing, you said it's averaging, nationwide it's 7%, but
Yeah.
we're seeing kind of like a 5% increase in expenses
Yep.
this year, you said. So if we were strategically, if we were saying, hey, we have fund balance, we can use it all to cover this year.
Mm-hmm.
The next year we're basically looking at Act Index plus. to
Right,
try
so
to
then you're
up
playing
again.
catch up.
Sure,
Right.
yes.
Um,
Versus a gradual,
Right.
like trying to find a happy medium kind of.
Right, we want to try to find the balance. We're trying to find the balance between using our fund balance and then our tax base, our taxpayers. So we need to continue the next 2 months to really really evaluate as the state budget gets approved, as the assessments continue to roll in. How can we look to improve our projected deficit and go from there.
Even though this is the final proposed budget tax increase does not lock in until the June meeting after we've had.
It could be the May or the June meeting. Yeah.
May 25th.
Sorry, May 25th. Yeah.
It has to sit for 30 days pending April's approval. So the board could choose to do it in June. But right now our timeline is the end of May. June board meeting is 2 weeks out.
Mark, I really appreciate the 1%, 10%.
Yep.
Really showing us kind of what the impact of each 10%. So thank you for that.
Yep. Okay, there are some additional supplemental PDFs on here for presentation, but they're more templates in nature. They break down everything that we just spoke about. There's a final proposed budget report, but again, this gets into more of the detail on the wages. If anybody has any questions, you can feel free to reach out to me. We'll go over it, but it's nothing that wasn't already previously reported. Same thing with the revenue projections. It just gets into the real nitty-gritty detail on the, as the chart of accounts for that PDE requires. But if anybody has questions, I can get into that with them. So if there's no other questions, I just want to make sure that it's okay to move this forward to the April board meeting. Okay?
Thank you.
All right. And then the second item on the agenda is our comparison for March 2023 to March of 2022 from a budget to actual standpoint. So last year, local revenue stood at 99.11% collected, while this year is at 97.22% collected. This is predominantly affected by a lag in transfer taxes. We're seeing about a 19% lag in transfer tax this year compared to prior year. Delinquent taxes are a little bit lower as well. That's just the nature of the marketplace and the nature of the real estates right now. So that's at 97.22% on actual for the current year. State revenue is just about a little bit higher this year. There was a payment that we received for Social Security reimbursement that was later in the prior year and earlier in the current year, so that's more of a timing difference on this one. Federal revenue, again, we had a ESSERS 1 and ESSERS 2 program running at this time last year, and ESSERS 3. So we had all three programs running at this time last year. This year, ESSERS 1 dropped off. ESSERS 2 was just about halfway done. So we're winding down that federal revenue, and that's where we are for the current year as far as that line item. That's why we're only at 65.2%. So overall, Revenues stand at $130,363,527 on actual, which is 89.78% of budget compared to the prior year of 90.16%. Again, it's predominantly being driven by the decrease in the local taxes attributable to transfer taxes and delinquent taxes. As far as expenses go, wages and benefits, wages are sitting at 59.13% of budget to actual or actual to budget compared to 60.64% of the prior year, very comparable. As we make our way down, benefits sit at 59.94% of budget to actual, while prior year was 60.85%. Again, very comparable. Professional services are greater than the prior year due to special education costs and settlements, as well as increase in professional development services. Property services exceeded last year with several unexpected maintenance projects. These were roofing repairs, flashing to some of the elementary buildings that had to get done. Obviously, we're not done in the prior year. Charter school tuition, which we've talked about extensively over the last couple months, has exhausted the budget 7 months into the school year and just continues to increase as we're seeing more participation at these charter schools. Transportation right now are 2 months in arrears. That's a timing issue from the vendor. What they do is they give us a preliminary invoice. We review it. We go over every bus line that they say that they ran, and we compare it with our reports. There were some discrepancies in this past February, so we held off on paying that. That's just a timing issue. As soon as we clean that up with them, we'll get those paid and we'll get back to being more timely. Equipment experienced a larger increase this year as a result of the reimbursement to the capital reserve. If you recall, last month we had to reimburse the capital reserve for a F-350, a mower, and there was a snow blower purchased. It was $109,000 in total, so we had to take those dollars out of the capital reserve and move those dollars back over to the general fund. That's a PDE regulation that they came down with clarification. So we just wanted to make sure we clean that up. Debt service and interest payments are being processed as budgeted. Overall, our overall costs have risen over last year while our revenues remain steady. The budget, again, our actual expenses and revenue, while trending in line with budget, we're still not as positive through the 9 months in the last fiscal year, but we'll continue to monitor and continue to evaluate as we get through. Any questions on our budget to actual for the month of March?
Yes, sir. Based, would you say, last year, kind of historical, what are your expectations that we'll get to 100% of the budget revenue and that we'll be 100% or lower of the budgeting expenses?
If I had a crystal ball, I'd love to tell you we're going to hit every revenue and come under expenses, but I think our budget development is very sound. I think we really take a lot of time to look into what we're budgeting as far as a revenue standpoint and relying on our tax collections. State revenue is always a strong number to hit, and we're always pretty confident in that. There are some variables in the local revenue, but I think at the end of the day, I think we're going to be very close to hitting our revenues as far as what we projected from a budgetary standpoint. There might be some ebbs and flows on which line items might be higher. I know interest earnings, as everybody can attest to right now, interest earnings are 4.5% compared to what they were last year, was probably 0.4%. So we've picked up more interest earnings, but we've had a lag in transfer taxes. So we just kind of have to see how that shakes out. As far as wages and expenditures go, I think again we do a very good job of being due diligent, especially with our personnel and our benefits and trying to calculate all that out. If we can come under that 100% of budget, I would love to tell you we did it, Rick, and I can let you know.
To be exact.
Yeah. Well, last year Dave Wesley got within $6,000 even. I don't know how he did it, but I'll have to look at his crystal ball. But that's what we're aiming for, if not better.
That's why you retired.
Go out on a high note. So if anybody has any questions with that, they can always feel free to call or email me. But those are actually my only 2 items on the agenda tonight.
More comment on either of those things? Any public comment on anything we covered?
Actually, I have one more comment. I just want to introduce Asita Patel. She's the new financial manager for the school district. She was previously the payroll coordinator, and she'll be taking over my job. So thanks for coming tonight, Steve. And then that's it. Now I'm done.
All right. No further comment? Any wish to adjourn? This meeting is adjourned, sorry.
So does that mean she's going to be,
Okay.
does that mean Steve's going to be?
No, I can't throw it into that. You gotta give her a couple minutes. Thank you. Thank you. So are you done?